Welcome back to our channel. Before we dive into yet another fascinating and mysterious stories, I would like to invite you to watch, to like, and subscribe to the channel. Also activate the notification sound. Greetings, beloved soul, child of the earth, seeker of meaning. Today, we consider a voice that echoes across your world. A leader guiding one of humanity's largest spiritual families. Following the death of Pope Francis on April 21, 2025, the Catholic Church is preparing to elect his successor, papal conclave. The process by which a new pope is chosen is scheduled to begin between May 6 and May 11, 2025. This timeframe allows for the traditional 9-day mourning period, Novembrials, and provides time for cardinals from around the world to travel to the Vatican. Conclave will take place in the Sistine Chapel, where 135 cardinal lectors under the age of 80 will convene in secrecy to vote. Two-thirds majority is required to elect the new pope, given that Pope Francis appointed approximately 80% of the current cardinal elect. Many from diverse regions, the upcoming election is expected to reflect his emphasis on global representation and pastoral pre-benchal. Candidates papabili include Cardinal Pietro Parolin, Italy, Cardinal Robert Seragini, and Cardinal Luis Antonio Tagle, Philippines. Among others, conclave's outcome will significantly influence the future direction of the Catholic Church, balancing between tradition and the reforms initiated by Pope Francis. Pope Francis, a name now familiar, globalithi, first pope, hailing from the Americas. A land brimming with vibrant faith and complex challenges. First of his papal name, choosing Francis, evoking the spirit of the humble saint of Assisi. Known for his love for the poor, for peace, for creation itself, and perhaps more than any pontiff in recent memory, he has dedicated his life, his ministry, his papacy, to focusing attention on those often overlooked. The poor, the marginalized, those living on the peripheries of society. The forgotten ones, all while navigating the immense responsibility of leading the global Catholic Church through difficult, sometimes turbulent waters, addressing controversial issues where opinions diverge sharply. Where not everyone within or outside the Church supports the direction Taquinho were granted. As your text notes, a rare opportunity for human interaction. With him, a conversation at the Vatican speaking in his native Spanish. The language of his heart, his warmth, sharp intelligence, and deep conviction shown through transcending linguistic barriers. Let us reflect together on some of the themes discussed. Seeking the spiritual resonances, the divine echoes within the human words. To conversation began with a focus on the most vulnerable, the most precious, children, specifically the Church's first World Children's Day, an initiative close to his heart, a time when tens of thousands of young people, including those displaced as refugees from war-torn lands, would gather at the Vatican. A symbol of hope, a plea for their future. But the joy of this initiative was immediately tempered by the harsh reality facing children. Globalithi. Interviewer mentioned the UN reports of looming famine in Gaza, affecting countless children. Pope Francis's response was immediate. Broadening the scope, his heart clearly burdened. Not just in Gaza, he urged, think of Ukraine. He spoke of the young refugees from Ukraine arriving in Rome, carrying invisible wounds. You know something, he shared, his voice perhaps tinged with sorrow. Those children don't know how to smile anymore. Imagine that. Beloved soul, innocence so traumatized, suffering so deep, that the simple, universal language of a child's smile is forgotten, erased by fear, loss, violence. I'll say something to them, he continued, and they have forgotten how to smile, and that is very painful from our perspective. Witnessing the impact of human conflict on these little ones, we affirm, this is a tragedy that wounds the heart of heaven itself. Children are sacred vessels of becoming. Their light, meant to shine brightly, war dims. That light prematurely. Conversation naturally turned to the architects of such conflict. A direct question, a message for Vladimir Putin regarding Ukraine. Pope's response was not a political attack, but a universal plea, encompassing all conflicts. Please, he implored, addressing all warring countries. All of them, stop the war, a simple, yet profoundly difficult command, echoing the cries of humanity and the desire of heaven. You must find a way of negotiating for peace, strive for peace, and then. A statement born, perhaps, of long, painful observation of human history. A negotiated peace is always better than an endless war. This reflects a deep wisdom, acknowledging that perfect justice is rarely achieved through violence, and that dialogue, however difficult, holds more promise than perpetual destruction. Pursuit of peace, even imperfect peace, is a divine imperative. Discussion then shifted to another epicenter of global pain and division. The conflict between Israel and Gaza. Interviewer noted the deep divisions, the anguish felt worldwide, the protests erupting, the alarming rise in anti-Semitism. Pope Francis's response tackled the dangerous root of such hatred. Ideology. All ideology is bad, he stated firmly, and anti-Semitism is an ideology, and it is bad. He drew a crucial distinction, one often lost in heated rhetoric. Any anti is always bad. You can criticize one government or another, he clarified. The government of Israel, the Palestinian government, you can criticize all you want. Criticism of policy, of actions, is permissible, even necessary at times, but not anti a people. Neither anti-Palestinian nor anti-Semitic. No, this is a vital spiritual principle. One can disagree with, even condemn, the actions of governments or groups, but one must never descend into hatred or prejudice against an entire people, defined by ethnicity or religion. Anti-ideologies dehumanize, demonize, and pave the way for horrific atrocity are poisons to the soul, antithetical to the divine spark present in every human being. The Pope consistently calls for ceasefires and peace. The interviewer asked if he could personally help negotiate. His answer revealed his deep reliance on the spiritual foundation of his role. What I can do is pray. He responded simply, I pray a lot for peace, and then, combining the spiritual with the practical call to human responsibility, and also to suggest, please stop negotiate. He recognizes the limits of his political influence, perhaps, but embraces the unlimited power of prayer, while simultaneously using his moral platform to urge dialogue and cessation of violence. This balance, fervent prayer coupled with persistent advocacy for peace, reflects a deep understanding of how spiritual reality and human action must work together. Prayer, indeed, has been the cornerstone of this Pope's life since his birth as Jorge Mario Bergoglio in Buenos Aires, Argentina, in 1936, born into a working-class family of Italian immigrants who had fled hardship in their homeland. His background wasn't one of privilege, but of grounded reality, shaping his lifelong empathy for migrants and the poor. Interestingly, before dedicating his life to the church by entering the seminary, the young Bergoglio pursued science. He worked as a chemical technician, possessing a scientific mind alongside his developing spiritual vocation. Perhaps this unique blend contributes to his pragmatic approach, his grounding in reality, even while speaking of profound spiritual truths. But his own personal formula, the guiding principle, evident throughout his life and papacy, seems to be one of radical simplicity, echoing his chosen namesake. Saint Franciscus is visibly reflected even in small details. Famously continues to wear the plain silver pectoral cross he wore as Archbishop of Buenos Aires, rather than adopting more ornate traditional papal symbols. Search result 1 notes his preference for black shoes over the restored red papal shoes, and while he wears the white cassock, his choices often favor simplicity over traditional regalia. While such external symbols might seem minor, they often signal a deeper orientation, a desire to avoid the trappings of power and remain connected to a simpler, more humble expression of faith. His commitment to simplicity, to remaining close to the ordinary, was dramatically underscored by his choice of residence upon becoming pope, 11 years prior to this interview. Instead of occupying the opulent apostolic palace overlooking St. Peter's Square, the traditional papal residence for centuries, he chose to live in the much simpler Vatican guesthouse, the Casa Santa Marta communal living space, where he eats in the common dining room, interacts more directly with visitors and staff. This choice sent a powerful message from the very beginning of his papacy. a desire to lead not from a place of isolated grandeur, but from closer proximity to the everyday realities of the church and the world. It was in this simpler dwelling, the Casa Santa Marta, where the interview took place, surrounded by images of faith, like a painting of the Virgin Mary, within the heart of the Vatican, yet in a space reflecting his personal choice for humility. Even amidst discussing grave global issues, his sense of humor, a sign of inner freedom and groundedness, remained evident. Conversation then turned to a topic deeply personal to Pope Francis. Rooted in his own family history, interviewer shared her own family's immigrant story. Catholics from Northern Ireland, seeking refuge and opportunity in the United States, acknowledged the Pope's own family history. Fleeing fascism in Italian, she highlighted his consistent advocacy for migrants, particularly children, his frequent calls for governments to build bridges of welcome, not walls of exclusion. Pope Francis responded with both warmth and conviction, touching upon the positive aspect of migration. Migration is something that makes a country grow, he stated, then, employing his characteristic humor, perhaps to lighten the serious topic momentarily. They say that you Irish migrated and brought the whiskey, that the Italians migrated and brought the mafia, he quickly added. It's a joke, don't take it badly, but the humor quickly gave way to the underlying reality. But migrants sometimes suffer a lot. They suffer a lot, too much. His empathy, born from his own heritage and his encounters with migrants worldwide, was palpable. Interviewer then brought the issue closer to home, mentioning a specific situation in Texas, where the state government was attempting to shut down a Catholic charity operating on the border with Mexico, a charity providing essential humanitarian assistance, food, water, shelter, to undocumented migrants arriving there. Asked for his reaction, Pope Francis's response was direct, unequivocal, almost visceral. That is madness, he declared, sheer madness too. Close the border and leave them there, that is madness. He articulated a principle of fundamental human decency. Rooted in Christian teaching, the migrant has to be received hospitality. Welcome, seeing the face of Christ in the stranger, is paramount. Acknowledged the complexities involved after the initial reception. Thereafter, you see how you're going to deal with him. Maybe you have to send him back, I don't know. Recognizing the need for process, for order, for discernment regarding individual cases, but each case ought to be considered humanely, right? The emphasis remained firmly on the humanity of the migrant, the need for compassionate consideration above purely political or punitive measures. Closing the door to those in desperate need, in his view, was simply madness. This deep concern for the suffering of migrants was evident from the very start of his papacy's first official trip outside of Rome, as Pope was not to a major world capital or a wealthy diocese, was to the tiny Italian island of Lampedusa, situated in the Mediterranean Sea, geographically closer to Africa than mainland Italy. Lampedusa had become a primary arrival point, and tragically, often a graveyard, for thousands of migrants attempting the perilous sea crossing from North Africa. Fleeing poverty, war, persecution, went there to meet the survivors, to mourn the dead, to draw the world's attention to their plight. Interviewer recalled that trip, specifically remembering a powerful phrase Pope Francis used. He spoke of the globalization of indifference, a chilling diagnosis of the modern world's apathy towards widespread suffering. Asked what is happening, why this indifference persists, the Pope responded with stark honesty. Do you want me to state it plainly? People wash their hands. He evoked the image of Pontius Pilate, washing his hands, abdicating responsibility for the fate of an innocent man. He applied it broadly. There are so many Pontius Pilates on the loose out there, people who see what is happening. The wars, the injustice, the poverty, the crimes, but who choose detachment, apathy, inaction. That's okay. That's okay, they implicitly say, and wash their hands. It's indifference. He repeated, that is what happens when the heart hardens and becomes indifferent. His plea was deeply pastoral, deeply spiritual. Please, we have to get our hearts to feel again. We cannot remain indifferent in the face of such human dramas. The globalization of indifference is a very ugly disease. Very ugly. From our celestial view, we see this indifference as a spiritual malady, a closing off of the heart to the interconnectedness of all beings. A denial of the shared divine spark. Pope Francis's call to feel again is a callback to essential humanity, to the compassion that reflects the heart of God. Pope Francis has certainly not remained indifferent to one of the most painful, insidious scandals afflicting the Church itself: the rampant sexual abuse of hundreds of thousands of children worldwide by members of the clergy, and the subsequent cover-ups by Church leadership over decades. Interviewer acknowledged his efforts, stating he has done more than perhaps any previous pope to try and reform the Church, implement stricter policies, and repent for these horrific crimes. But the question remained: has the Church done enough? Pope Francis's answer was clear and resolute. It must continue to do more, acknowledging the ongoing nature of the work. Fortunately, he began, likely meaning unfortunately, or emphasizing the gravity. The tragedy of the abuses is enormous, and against this, he continued, an upright conscience is needed, and not only to not permit it but to put in place the conditions so that it does not happen again. Prevention, accountability, systemic change are essentially reiterated his stance. Zero tolerance, it cannot be tolerated. He affirmed the process. When there is a case of a religious man or woman who abuses, the full force of the law falls upon them, implying both canonical church law and civil consequences, where applicably concluded. In this, there's been a great deal of progress, acknowledging advancements made in awareness, policy, and accountability, while implicitly recognizing that the journey towards complete healing, justice, and prevention is ongoing. Deep wounds inflicted require continuous vigilance and commitment to reform. Perhaps one of the defining characteristics of Pope Francis's leadership, often sparking both admiration and controversy, is his capacity for openness, his emphasis on mercy, forgiveness, and pastoral accompaniment. Applied to the nearly 14 billion Catholics worldwide, and resonating far beyond, signaled this different tone early in his papacy, setting the world, and perhaps parts, of the Church itself on notice during an impromptu press conference on the papal plane. Returning from Brazil in 2013, asked about homosexual individuals within the Church, specifically regarding priests, he responded with words that reverberated globally. If someone is gay, he said, and he searches for the Lord and has good will, who am I to judge? This remark didn't change official Church doctrine on homosexual acts, but it signaled a significant shift in pastoral tone, from condemnation towards understanding, discernment, and prioritizing a person's sincere search for God. Did not stop there. This pastoral approach continued to unfold. Interviewer pointed to a more recent, highly debated decision made the previous year, allowing Catholic priests to offer pastoral blessings to same-sex couples. This caused significant discussion and division within the Church. With this change, Pope Francis offered a crucial clarification, distinguishing between liturgical blessing of a union and pastoral blessing of individuals. No, he stated, what I allowed was not to bless the union that cannot be done, because that is not the sacrament of marriage. I cannot. The Lord made it that way, reaffirming the Church's traditional definition of marriage, but he continued, emphasizing the distinction, to bless each person. Yes, the blessing is for everyone, for everyone. He explained further the perceived contradiction. To bless a homosexual-type union, however, goes against the given right, natural law, church law. But to bless each person, why not? His focus remained on the individual seeking God's grace. Regardless of their situation, the blessing is for all. This reflects his consistent emphasis on God's mercy being available to everyone, prioritizing pastoral care and accompaniment for individuals, even while upholding established Church doctrine regarding sacraments and unions. It's a delicate balancing act, seeking to be inclusive and merciful without formally changing core teachings, an approach that inevitably draws both praise for its compassion and criticism for its perceived ambiguity or departure from tradition. So now, we stand at the edge of an Aron era marked not by crowns or command, but by sandals worn thin on paths walked with the poor. Did not reign He served, did not command from thrones. He knelt in the dust, did not ask us to follow. Rulish asked us to follow. Christin, every handshake with a stranger in, every whisper of mercy in, every time we choose peace over pretend. Now the throne is empty, but the mission, the sacred mission, remains. Let the winds of heaven carry his words to every heart. Let the memory of Francis echo in the alleys and cathedrals alike. Let the Church remember its first call, not to power but to people. He reminded us that holiness is not loud, it is quiet, patient, brave, it feeds the hungry, it heals the wounded, it walks among the forgotten and says, "You are not forgotten." His voice may have fallen silent on earth's spot, listening every act of Louvain, every effort for justicine, every child who returns to faith because someone cared enough to listen. Her speak still. His legacy is not marblite, is not in monuments, it lives in Uso. Carry it forward, the hands that heal, the heart that welcomes, the voice that stirs the sleeping world echoes. Now it is your turn to shepherd, your turn to walk enlightened, your turn to make the Church beautiful, again from the inside out.